Sometimes my mouse. Okay. Welcome everyone to the Irish American Heritage Museum in Albany, New York. We're delighted tonight to have with us the authors of two fantastic books. They've really brought history to life, I have to say, and shown sort of a side of Ireland and older Ireland that you don't normally see. So our two presenters tonight are Dr. Sarah Ann Buckley, who's a lecturer in history at the National University of Ireland in Galway, sister to my own alma mater in Dublin. She's the chair of the Irish History Students Association and the co-principal investigator of the Tuam Oral History Project. She's also a senior research fellow at the UNESCO Child and Family Research Centre, and she has authored or edited 8 books and about 50 other publications. So definitely putting me to shame there with the publications. And then Dr. John Breslin is personal professor in electronic engineering at the NUI Galway too, where he is director of the Tech Innovative Entrepreneurship Programs. He was co-principal investigator of the Insight and Confirm SFI research centres. He is a co-founder of boards.ie. Oh God, I used that back in the day. Adverts.ie and the Porter Shed. He's from the Burren and lives in Connemara, so beautiful part of the country if any of you have been there. You know, very kind of desolate and inspiring there. But we're delighted to have you. And of course, the two books are Old Ireland in Colour. So we're going to have a presentation from the two doctors and then a little bit of questions and answers at the end. So welcome, guys, and thank you very much for being with us.
Thanks so much, Elizabeth.
Thanks, Elizabeth.
Great to be here. Yeah, so we have we've basically pulled a selection of some of the moments, I suppose, from our most recent book, actually, from Old Ireland in Colour 2, and hopefully we can have a good discussion around some of these pictures, and they kind of span all parts of the country, but also the Irish abroad, and I think of particular relevance to the to hopefully to the audience and the the Irish American Heritage Museum. We're delighted to be here this evening. So we start off with this one. It's from 1954, and it is from County Galway, so not too far away from where we are. Myself and Sarah Ann are based at the moment, and it's from the National Library of Ireland, and it's the two boys here from the cover of our book. So you'll see them on the cover of our book in colour. I'll just bring it into colour so you can see what this looks like in its transformed version. So Sarah, and this is one of our favorite pictures, isn't it?
It is, yeah. It was one that we considered for the cover of the first book. It's two boys. It's in Loughrea, if people know County Galway. And they are from the Irish travelling community, from the Sheridan and the O'Brien families. We unfortunately don't know their first names, but we are still looking. The photographer is Eleanor Wiltshire, who really, her photographs, especially her portraits and the way that she captured so many people and moments, like her photographs are beautiful. And we named this Sublix from the cant, the language used by the Irish travelling community, and yeah, we love this. So
yeah, it's a lovely photograph. So it's it's from I suppose pre popular color photography in Ireland, and what I did actually for the colorization in this was I looked at pictures from the 60s, because this is from 1954 of the travelling community, some around Galway, some elsewhere. And I use some of the colors from clothing and so on for this picture. So no, it's just one that kind of brings a smile to your face. And there's quite a bit going on with the people having the chat in the background and the horse and obviously the the caravan. But it's a lovely picture. And one we had in the original book. It's the only picture that appears in both books. So it's definitely one of our favorites. So yeah, we move on to the next one. Actually, we're going to go back in time, because this one is from 1954 and the next one is from 1854. So we're actually going back 100 years. And yeah, so again, this is this is the original version, the I would say black and white, but it's actually more sepia. It's from the Getty Museum's open content program, where they've made various paintings and photographs available to others to see and to reuse. And it was one of the earlier pictures that I worked on for the Old Ireland Colour social media project, and it just had huge impact, maybe because of the timing, being just from 1854, and also I think just the picture itself. So I'll show you the colorized version. So it's from Tipperary.
Oh, Tipperary.
Yeah.
Very unusual hat, isn't it?
It is, and I suppose possibly, a lot of we have this book we often reference, which is called Dress in Ireland, from Mairead Dunleavy, and a lot of the clothes of the era were sometimes hand-me-downs or second-hand clothes that would have come from Great Britain or other places in Ireland. So now this is actually from Templemore, which was the barracks in Tipperary, and at the time it was a British army barracks. So, possibly some kind of leftover army hat, or as it could be from somewhere else. But yeah, it is quite an unusual one. And I know some people.
And we wanted to flag this as well. Like as John said, it's just after the famine, the Great Famine, as it's known, 1854, and there's a bit more work done recently. There was an edited volume by Christine Keneally on childhood and children and the effects of the famine. And I suppose this image kind of, seemed to really strike a chord with a lot of people. Some people were suggesting that it might be a boy and a girl, or else two boys. But we really used it to kind of highlight, I suppose, the devastation that occurred in the years after, as well as during the famine itself. So Richmond Barracks, Templemore, very, very poignant. And again, there's been a bit more work done, I suppose, on the importance of clothing. Jimmy Kelly did an article before on how children were abducted in the 18th century to actually, for their clothing. So to show the kind of, I suppose, the importance of it, and I suppose a different context for today when we're a lot more consumer driven and have a lot more access. So yeah, it's one again we considered for the first book, and then it made it into the second.
Yeah. So we're kind of actually going to work, apart from the cover image, we're going to work kind of chronologically through time, through some of the pictures. And our next one is again from early on, and there's an American connection with this one here.
Yep.
You were
I know him well. Yeah.
So this is Thomas Francis Maher, a Waterford man, and it's a great picture. It's from the Library of Congress, and the Library of Congress has really a fascinating set of pictures of Irish people, but also the Irish in America. And this is one of them. It's actually from a series of 3 pictures, and I took one of them, I think, to colorize for the book. But there's a number of pictures of Maher in the Library of Congress, but this is again a quite striking one with his pose and his uniform. And it's always interesting to when you share these pictures as well, you get feedback from people in terms of colors and so on used. And when I colorize this, I looked at various uniform colors and so on, and found that the star on the shoulder was white, and there was kind of the yellow border. And somebody said that possibly what's called the Union, I've forgotten the name of it now, but it's basically the badge on his belt there. It may have been white instead of gold, or it might have been white gold and so on. So sometimes you always get these interesting little pointers from people in terms of actually what's in the images, and different people. Union Locket, I think, was the name it was called. You get different pointers from different people. But I suppose the other thing is there are paintings of Maher, and we know his eyes were blue from those paintings, and we would have used those for this particular picture. And you can see, I suppose, various marks and so on removed. But this one is from, when is it from?
1862, I think. This
1862. Back my notes, so soon after the other one.
And I suppose, like, one of the things we were trying to do, we've 150 plus images, but what you're trying to do is obviously reflect, as John said, this 100-year period where there's so much change, so much transformation. We have a section on the Irish abroad, and I suppose then you're trying to condense what something like the Dictionary of Irish Biography would have a few thousand words on into our 150 word captions. So this was definitely one of the harder ones when you're trying to pinpoint only 4 or 5 points in a life such as this.
Oh yeah, so, he was Isn't
so
the
we
stance
went,
very
obviously
funny?
one of the most infamous Irish nationalists in the 19th century, leader of the Young Irelanders in 1848, his involvement in the Irish Brigade and the Civil War, also the I suppose himself and William Smith O'Brien traveling to France and you know, bringing back that template for the Irish flag. So there's so much there. But what we usually also try to do is use the book as a way to direct people. So the Dictionary of Irish Biography, as you probably all know, is online now. It's fully available. So the entries there are especially for personalities, you know, very well-known personalities, but how that information and the different biographies and the different academic work has been crunched is really, really great. So you're trying to lead people to that, because for everyone wouldn't know a huge amount about some of these individuals.
Absolutely.
I guess,
I think, you know, and we might talk about this later on, but just to, while I'm thinking of it now, that his stance is so casual, you know, the leg cocked instead of that kind of military bearing, and even the coat thrown over the chair but still in the frame, you know. So we might talk later on about composition of photographs and how that changed and stuff too. But it's interesting, you know, like today you would be so, everyone is telling you to, you know, get in line and look here, and it's amazing that you can see the coat, you know, just flung off in what was supposed to be a professional kind of photograph.
Yeah, I think photographers, like, they used to frame pictures in that they would take out a certain portion of them, like, so this would have been on a glass plate negative, but often they would have, you know, taken portions of that. So whether it was deliberate or whether it was intentional, that they said, well, we're going to remove the surrounding objects anyway. But yeah, it's, and you know, as Sarah mentioned, in terms of trying to compress Maguire's biography onto what we have, like, which is kind of half a page. I actually recently shared out this picture, and I was trying to squeeze in the essentials into a tweet, which is almost impossible.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So no, but it's you know, it's a great picture, and you know, I think obviously he's an interesting character because he's, you know, well celebrated in the US, but also well celebrated in Ireland through various memorials and statues and cenotaphs and so on.
And as well, John, I suppose, like when John would be sourcing the photographs, highlighting the different collections internationally as well as the collections in Ireland. So that was kind of really important too. And I think in the second book we had a much broader range of archives, really, John, didn't we? And
everywhere from, you know, Poland to the Netherlands to Australia to this one obviously from the Library of Congress, New York Public Library. You know, they really came from all over. And you know, I suppose for various reasons. For example, we have a few pictures in the book from what's called Gallica, Bibliothèque Nationale de France, which is the French National Archive. And the reason they're in there is because stories of the day that were happening in Ireland were captured by the French newspapers, and they did digitize all of these newspaper, you know, photograph collections. And there's a huge bank of Irish related photographs in there. But the Library of Congress, you know, has really some amazing pictures. One of Muriel McSweeney, which we have in the book as well. The collection. So we have another Irish revolutionary coming up next, and again, one with a very strong US connection, and this one from the NLI as well. So we have John Devoy, and a bit like, you know, there's a picture behind me which you can probably see of Onoria Russa. I suppose you know, a view of Devoy that we're not used to seeing without the beers, you know. And this is him as a young man. I think it's 1866 or 1867, Sarah, and it's from Mountjoy Prison originally. And interestingly, you know, the National Archive has records, the prison records from that time, where they capture eye colors, hair color, height, and all of those essential details. So especially for this kind of process of colorization, these things are very useful, because it mentions his, I think, gray eyes or blue eyes, and then somewhere else in some interviews with him, it mentions, you know, blue eyes. So we have a kind of some idea of the coloring for Devoy. So yeah, it's again, I find these prison photographs in particular, probably because of, you know, what happened, and you know, I suppose the process of taking the photographs. You'll see some of these sometimes with we have ones in the first book of the Catalpa 6, and there's a kind of before and after picture where they're there and they're, you know, they're fine clothes and long hair and beards, and the next picture they're, you know, they're all shaved off and in the woolens, and so yeah, it's quite striking photo, Sarah.
Yeah, we did want to include Devoy for a number of reasons, but John has just pointed out one with the sources that was really important, because we had these different primary sources that were kind of, you know, connecting together and linking together. And then again, so much has been written about Devoy. Probably one of the quotes we included in the book was from the Times, who stated he was the most dangerous enemy of this country, as in Britain. from Ireland since Wolfe Tone. So just giving, I suppose, the enormity of his impact as a nationalist, obviously involved in the IRB, Clan na Gael, huge influence in Irish America. So we just wanted to, I suppose, include these figures that broadened out the impact of Irish people internationally. And as John said, to have a younger image of him, because a lot of the images that are out there are of that older statesmanly looking figure, but this is obviously at a particular moment.
We have one actually, Sarah, in the first book of the old boy with De Valera, the great story there of the split, I suppose, that happened there when De Valera came to America. But that's that statesman's like one you mentioned, yeah.
And again, I suppose how badly he was treated as well in prison, and so there was a lot of, I suppose, again with the caption, we did our best to lead people to down rabbit holes who didn't or wouldn't know about Devoy, which you would probably be surprised how many people in Ireland actually may not know about him. So
yeah, obviously he's, he is huge in a certain strand here in Irish America, but it's funny, as you say, like that at home, maybe he was just that generation too far back kind of thing,
Yeah, and this particular picture now isn't from the same archive, but again, we have another picture in the book from of Barbarossa, the one behind me I mentioned, which is from the New York Public Library. So again, this is just pointing out to the sources for some of these images. There's a great collection of hundreds of Fenian and IRB prisoners from two periods in the 60s, and they were in an album by a guy called Thomas Larkham, and that's in the NYPL. But it's just I suppose it's amazing where these pictures end up, and it's great to be able to, as Sarah mentioned, be able to reference all of these primary sources for the records of Devoy, and to be able to link those into the picture. So it's a bit of a change to this one because we're going to Kerry.
Oh yay, my own crowd.
Very, very good. So this is the Gap Girls, and it's a very early example of Irish tourism. So for those who come to Ireland, you've probably experienced tourism in different ways, but this is again from the 19th century, and we have a great picture here, which actually has names of the two girls in the picture, and also details of what they were wearing, which was again quite helpful for us in terms of colorization, because it mentioned red petticoats and white aprons, so on for the person on the right, and then it mentions paisley shawl for the person on the left. So this is from a collection of stereographs, and just for the viewers, stereographs were hugely popular at the end of the 19th century and the early 20th century. What happened was two photographs were taken at the same time, and from two different camera angles, and then two pictures were put side by side, and you viewed them in something called a stereo card viewer. And when you had these two pictures side by side in front of your eyes, you had this 3D effect. So it was closest you got to virtual reality or enhanced reality at the end of the 19th and early 20th century. And many of these stereograph negatives, but also the stereograph cards themselves are still in existence. These pictures we're looking at here, the one on the left will be one of a stereograph pair. There will be a left and right version, and the one on the right is part of a stereograph pair. So there's a left and right version of each of these two images. And again, you would be able to view this in a 3D effect when you would have the appropriate viewer. And it's from a collection of stereographs which were taken by two photographers, and then they were acquired by the Lawrence Studio in Dublin, and then later acquired as part of the Lawrence collection by the National Library of Ireland. So they're fascinating pictures, and I think the detail on them is just amazing, because they are glass plate negatives. They're just they're like high resolution images, and this is really the NLI have a fantastic collection of Irish works, and here's the color version.
Oh wow!
And so we have Joanna Keefe and Nora O'Connell, and I suppose as lots of people know, it often so-called ordinary individuals in history, we often don't have their names, or we don't get that sense of their identity. And obviously these two young women, they're selling refreshments on the Gap of Dunlow, as John said. That's extremely, I'm sure, difficult work in a lot of conditions. If you've ever, I can't even imagine if you've ever tried to drive around it, but if you're walking around it or making your way there to get a sense of the kind of work they're doing. And as John said, to just have these, like, I'm a historian of childhood and youth, and to have this is amazing. And to, you know a bit more, as John said, like we have it's madder red, isn't it, John, for these? Or is that, sorry, that's another one, the type of red, or the,
is one of the dyes. So like when I was doing some research into the different colors being used, the National Folklore Collection has a great set of transcripts of notes that were captured, usually sometimes by children of their grandparents or great aunts or uncles and so on, where they would describe basically how they used to dye clothes. So, I put together a document, and as well as the Dress of Ireland book, which I mentioned, this gives you a kind of picture of the typical types of dyes that were used. And they came from seaweeds, they came from berries, they came from barks, they came from things you would kind of, I suppose, expect, lichens and so on. A lot of lichen, actually. They would give us the kind of the browns, the reds, and the indigos and so on that were used. So the reds, at least as Sarah mentioned there, but also in the records for the picture from the stereograph pairs was mentioned. And we're lucky because a lot of the pictures in the National Archives, for one reason or another, either records weren't kept or records were lost. And the Lawrence collection in general, there are tens of thousands of plates, but unfortunately during the Rising, the Lawrence studio, their office was on Sackville Street, and the records were unfortunately all burnt. The negatives survived because they were, I think, in Rathmines, or they were somewhere away from the HQ. So there's a lot of these fantastic pictures where people are trying to guess the dates, trying to guess the people in them. And as Sarah mentioned, we're very fortunate to have the names of these two.
Women in
Keith on the left, Sarah, and who did you say was on the right?
Nora O'Connell.
O'Connell.
Yeah.
So there you go. And I'm sure because
they probably have people still there,
Oh yeah, I'd say so.
Yeah. I'm sure you could they're pretty young in this picture. I'm sure you could probably do some genealogy research and find them in the later records, because the census would have kicked in obviously in 1901, and there might even be some of the partial census fragments from the
it's around this. It's kind of roughly 1860s to 1880s. This, isn't it, John? That's the bracket we can give it. So
So again, you should be able to find actually you will be able to find birth, marriage, and death records for them in the Irish genealogy website. So because we know roughly where they are and we know their names, you definitely could find out more. So that's quite interesting as well. And a whole other rabbit hole you could go down. And actually, speaking of rabbit holes, because the next picture I was trying to find the records for these sisters, but I'm in touch actually with one of their I'm not sure if it's a direct descendants or is it a descendant of another sister, but we're just sending Facebook messages back and forth. He's in the US actually, and these are the O'Halloran sisters on the left, and Sarah, and I'll let you say a little bit about this one.
So this is like a great image. It's from June 1887. The O'Halloran sisters, we have Annie, Onoria, and Sarah, and they're in Bodyke in County Clare, and it was taken during basically their family was evicted, and we have this amazing story about the sisters because their brother Patrick recorded it, and it's available on the Clare County Library website. And he goes through how they were living in the house, two brothers, Patrick and Frank, their parents, the three sisters, and basically over kind of 3 generations, the rent they were paying had been tripled on the 17-18 acres that they were working. And it's obviously in the context of the land roar and the boycotts of rent. And over in the few weeks prior to their being evicted, they were preparing for it. So Patrick's story tells, or it's Frank's story, I'm confusing myself now, tells the story of, how they had barricaded the doors, how they were going in the top window, basically with a plank of wood. And then when the police and the bailiffs actually did come to the house, how 2 of the sisters were really very active in fighting them. One grabbing the sword bayonet, Onoria, and I think Sarah had like boiling water, and you know, these aren't passive young women. They're very active in you know, trying to, I suppose, preserve their family home. And I don't know, John, do you want to add the color? Because I actually think particularly has like,
sorry, here we go. So
so this again we considered as a cover for the book, but sometimes we have an image in the first book again of an eviction, and they seem to be, you know, incredibly poignant images for people. And yeah, the landlord at the time was Colonel John O'Callaghan, and even though they had gone to court, like they were paying £31, I think, and the court had stated that it should be lowered to 22, but you know, it really just showed the impact on a family. And I suppose how long I think they were preparing and then fighting and resisting. So it's kind of like a micro history of like one family during this time. But yeah, no, John has been going down the genealogy route as well.
And I was actually looking up, so you know, I was trying to find obviously records. I want to see kind of, you know, when were they born and so on. My understanding is that the three sisters went to the US afterwards, but actually I was in touch with a guy called Jim who's in the States, and his grandfather was a sister to Honora, and he actually sent me some pictures of basically a medal that Michael Davitt presented to Honora, which you know, for her bravery in this event, and he's inherited it. And you know, he actually shared this on Facebook as well, so this is all publicly known. But and then he sent me a picture of, so his grandfather is a sister of sorry, his grandfather was a brother of these sisters, and then his great grandmother would have been their mother, and he sent me a picture of their mother. So it's just fascinating, I suppose, the way people come out with stories of relatives of people who are in the book. And you know, this is you know, it's just such a great example. And you know, obviously there's a US connection there in terms of as I said, many of the family, which would have been common, I suppose, you know, going to the US in the 19th century, ending up in the US. And actually I have a picture of the gravestone of a number of the sisters as well. Nora, which is Honora, Annie, and Sarah. And this has all of the dates as well. So again, just fascinating to see where that happened, you know. So yeah, you could definitely get lost in just one picture.
Oh, I'd say so, yeah.
Yeah, and this is again a really detailed picture. It's from the pool studio in Washford, and it's actually from Washford. And we see here, I suppose, a lot of animals and a lot of people in this picture, and you know,
a lot of police.
There's a lot of police. Yeah, these are the and I think, you know, particularly because I'll put this in color. I think particularly when I, you know, colorized this one, it really made it more apparent to me how many RIC officers there were.
That's amazing,
yeah. The uniforms seem to kind of stand out a bit more. Yeah. So like I think there's at least you know, there's at least 30 of them, because you know.
I'd say yeah, because there's even at the back there. Yeah.
There.
What year did you say, John?
So roughly. This is 1897 that the image was taken. But as John said, it's a culmination of, again, I suppose, a protest going on a number of years. So basically, factories from 1892 had begun to purchase pigs directly from farmers. So the professional pig buyers were cut out, and you know, they're protesting this. So the police are actually kind of like have an escorting role here.
Yeah.
So like throughout the newspapers, like over every few months, you would see, you know, another discussion of this in different kind of forums. So I think it's fairly tense looking. And then in the back we have, John will talk more about the ship, but we have the Adelphi Hotel, which was knocked or was renovated and changed in 1970. So like it's fairly iconic setting as well. But John, yeah, like you're completely right. The police presence is really, really striking.
Yeah.
Called it pig strike as well. Sorry, the image.
Pig strike. Yeah, and I think, you know, you can see the way they're positioned. They're obviously positioned at all kind of angles of where maybe trouble may happen, you know, and you know, they're wearing this RIC uniform, which has, you know, it has a harp on the helmet, with kind of a little bit of red in the background. So you got the golden harp with the red background, and then the uniforms were this kind of black rifle green color. And the Adelphi Hotel, as Sarah mentioned, it was not. I think it's now the location of the Tower Hotel. And in the background, there's a boat, and I'm peering at my screen here, but I know the name of the boat is called the Limerick because we found pictures of it. It says ferry, so it was used as a ferry boat, and I believe it connected not just Ireland to Great Britain, but also to the Channel Islands, and did a number of services. It's one of the railway company ships. Sometimes the transportation networks were all integrated, and that the railways were they also own some boats and hotels and so on. So but yeah, there's a lot of interesting detail in this one, from the kids, little girl sitting there on the horse and cart, which are hopefully enjoying the ride on the horse and cart, perched very precariously there.
Safely, hopefully.
Yeah, there's no health and safety issues there.
No.
And there's lots of kids obviously with little pages. There's signs there for herring sale. I'm guessing either those kids are holding out flyers for the sale, or maybe something to do with the strike. But again, a huge amount of pigs in the foreground there,
and the dirt on the street. Like, I'm looking at the ladies with the long skirts.
Oh yeah. You can see the dirt, and you can see there's obviously some other stuff as well on the street that they may be walking through, so that wouldn't be uncommon. But yeah.
Oh, that's fabulous.
Yeah. So next picture is from the Congested Districts Board. It was taken by, I think, Major Rutledge Fair, and it's from Connemara, so not too far away actually. I'm in Connemara technically at the moment. So it's again a very striking picture of these young chaps outside their school, and it's one of a number of pictures taken by Rutledge Fair. But yeah, I suppose the clothing is something that's quite striking here, Sarah.
Yeah, for those that aren't aware, the CDB, it was set up to alleviate poverty on the western seaboard, so from Donegal down to West Cork. So this is like just after it's been set up, and it's just the year before as well. Compulsory schooling was introduced in 1892. So children from 6 to 14 years of age were meant to attend school for 92 days a year. Clothing is interesting. If people have seen this image before, there's this, and then there's another actually of girls. But the image of the boys is quite interesting. As you can see, there's only 2 or 3 boys wearing trousers. Most of them are in skirts. And different historians have written about this. Margaret O'Hogartig in Framing the West, she wrote that one of the possible reasons, aside from the fact that skirts are easier to make, which they were, another possible reason was that it would protect the boys from the fairies, as there was some folklore in the area that boys were more valuable than girls. So that's another assertion that could be made. And John might talk a bit about breaching as well, but you can see even the haircuts, there would have been issues around lice. There would have been, the absolute poverty here is kind of, and Ciara Brannock has written about the Congested Districts Board, but, probably a lot more attention could be placed on it, just especially for those with an interest in kind of the history of the west of Ireland. And it's dissolved then in 1923, I've seen, in the Irish Free State. But yeah, I don't know, John, do you want to say anything about the breaching or?
Yeah, well, I guess the pictures taken by Rutledge Fair, they're for Tuke, who did this study, and they're part of the Tuke collection in the NLI. But the breaching, I suppose the thing there was that it was easier to go to the toilet and so on if you were had these types of clothes, and breaching was kind of almost sort of the coming of age of some young boys.
For some of the boys, yeah.
Transition from these two trousers. I kind of, from the pictures I'd seen before this, most of the pictures of boys with skirts instead of trousers were younger children. So obviously, it went on quite some time, and perhaps that was, again, this is obviously a very a place that was probably experiencing more hardship. So perhaps the breaching went on longer as a result, because they were more expensive to wear trousers, and maybe this was part of it, that maybe it was worn by older children. But it's particularly striking, I guess, because you can see that, as Sarah Ann mentions, only two in this particular view, wearing pants. So it's quite.
And guys, these children weren't orphans, were they? Like, they're just,
no,
this
they're
place
just
feeding
attending
them or
school.
something? Oh, school. Yeah. Okay, yeah. Before it was compulsory.
Yeah.
Well, no, it's actually, but yeah, this is just around the time it's coming in. Yeah.
Okay. God, that's great. Yeah.
And I know one of these was in Letterfrack. I'm not sure was this picture, and again, some of the records are a bit spotty in terms of where the exact pictures were taken, especially with the CDB. Like, there are some pictures that were there are Donegal or Connemara, but nobody's exactly sure. But again, it's
there is a nice essay in Framing the West that, as I mentioned, on kind of that collection, which
Great,
another great book on history of photography.
Yeah.
So I particularly like this picture. It's from Waterford. It's from the 1890s. Don't have an exact date, but we know it's from the 1890s because of the other pictures. These are a series of glass plate negatives that I acquired last year, and again, I think just the faces on this one just particularly kind of jumped out at me, in terms of looking at the camera, and with some suspicion, but also just the way they're kind of laid out around this style. It's a great picture. So it's from Waterford. It's from the 1890s, and again, as we mentioned earlier on, I think a lot of these clothes would have been, most likely secondhand, because you can see they're barefoot. They're wearing these clothes, but very stylish, and it's a great. I love this picture anyway. I think it's a great one, Sarah Ann.
Yeah, and like John, John has been kind of acquiring some of these archives, which is amazing, because they're images that we haven't seen, and again, as a historian of childhood, it just I learn from this photograph, because you can see, like, even the hats that the girls are wearing, the way that they're holding themselves, like, they obviously look quite serious, but it's probably unusual to be having your photograph taken. And yeah, as John said, like, the palette of colors is obviously it's much smaller at this time, but Marie Dunleavy and others, and there's a lot of work being done actually at the moment by Eliza McKee and other scholars on the history of dress, and children's dress as well, which I think is really important. But it obviously is really, your social class is a big factor in this, and we can see none of the girls obviously have shoes on. That's just one point that you could kind of make as well. And it's a stunning photograph.
But like, that red dress is obviously excuse me, like, quite well made. The lining is gorgeous. It's kind of an adult looking dress on the top, so as you say, and even the hat looks to be quite fancy. So maybe the local big house is donating clothes, and even if they're adult clothes, the kids are wearing them.
Absolutely, and you can see some minor tears, in the dress at the bottom, but obviously, that's probably why it was handed down. I think this particular one, if I remember, it's got some kind of embroidering with little berries and so on the dress, but it is obviously very fancy looking. So as I said, it could have come from a local. There were many in Waterford in particular. In the same collection, there are many of the great houses in the area, and could very well have come from one of those.
And then the ages of them, that this little toddler one is hanging out with, her 10 or 11-year-old sister, and maybe they're going to, milk a cow or something, or they're hardly playing, like, but other they might be, I suppose.
They might be, they could be.
They both work and play. You never know.
Skiving off.
Skiving off, yeah.
So we're going to stay in Waterford for this one, which is again some more people at school, and I think these ones, when they're in color, they really do shine through, and maybe it's just the way the woods kind of comes to life, and the people obviously themselves, but also the detail, because there's obviously a lot going on here, which there's somebody there on the kind of the typing machine or the adding machine in the middle. Adding, there is a bit of maybe it could be accounting. There's there's been a bit of debate about what are they studying. Some people have been trying to read the blackboard in the background. You've got the holy altar in the background, some charts on the wall, and I think I remember when I was colorizing this one, over on the right hand side there is a picture of Jesus. I was trying to kind of zoom in on and see if I was coloring incorrectly, but so this is the picture in color, Sarah Ann, and this is from the 1890s as well, if I recall.
Yes, it's the 1890s, and they're we think they're probably studying bookkeeping. That's kind of what we kind of landed on. It's Mount Sion School in County Waterford. Edmund Rice was connected to this school, so also that was something that we kind of wanted to highlight. I suppose we're looking at the history of education in the 19th century. One of the biggest figures there. And as John said, to me, it's actually fairly typical what you would expect to see. Even the way that they're incredibly attentive. The master is there. This is my what I would expect to see, particularly from a school of this class, and from the ages the boys are at. Now there is a variety of ages really there, John, which is interesting too.
Yeah, you can see obviously I'm only guessing now, but it looks like they're kind of 9 to 14 or something, but there is definitely a range. You can see some of the older boys there in the middle at the front. So, but again,
but a lot of the country schools still do that. Maybe there's only
you'd have to needs must.
There might be just 2 rooms with 4 classes in the one room, so that would be still common.
And actually, I was thinking before you said that, John, it looks very pedagogically progressive, like to have the desks facing each other, in these little work groups instead of all in a line. But now I'm thinking maybe they've divided them, like this half of the room is the kind of junior section.
Yeah, you're right. Actually, on the right hand side there, the junior
they're probably studying different things. They're right.
It's very interesting though. And look at, my God, the Mary, the altar, dripping with ferns and flowers and all kinds.
Yeah, we were trying to think of maybe that we were saying maybe it was around May, or it might be around a feast day, so that you can kind of see that.
And of course, then the blackboard, like this means this man maybe changes his classroom around. Maybe there's a blackboard at the other end of the room, like what you would expect to see in a school. This is quite amazing, really.
Yeah, actually, when you said about the arrangement, I started thinking of MBA students, because they always have this kind of huge. You kind of come into the middle and you're talking at them, but it's very progressive.
Now we know like when you think about the old days and did you be smacked and learning by rote, like this looks to be quite independent learning, kind of going on.
Yeah. No, it's a great picture, and I suppose even just that there probably was a range of things going on. So maybe as those people on the left were doing the accounting, maybe the people on the right were doing something else on the blackboard. But but of course it's probably to a certain extent posed as well for the camera. But,
yes, I was going to say
yeah. There's our deflation.
So we move on to our next picture, which has a very strong American connection. And these two are the Mayo ancestors of Joe Biden. So these are the Blewitts, and it's an image from, well, it's actually in a number of places, but this particular copy obtained from the Internet Archive. And I suppose, as you start to look at these pictures, you're kind of looking for resemblances in someone and I suppose it's like also when you get pictures of your own ancestors, you're kind of looking at them thinking, does that look like my aunt or my whoever, So it's an interesting picture, and it's one of the pictures in the Irish and the World, or the Irish Abroad type section in our book. Irish in the World is titled, and it's date on this one is 1906 actually. So the colorized version is coming up. Here we go.
Wow.
Yeah, so it probably became fairly iconic in Ireland actually during in 2020. But on the left we have President Biden's great grandfather Edward Blewett, and then on the right we have his great great grandfather Patrick. And as John said, like there's a mural in Ballina in the square to this at the moment. And I suppose when we were looking at Patrick in particular, so that story of emigration, he emigrated in 1832, and then he returned, and his father and mother came with it. But his father was, I suppose, very well known in the area for the work he did during the famine, particularly the public works schemes. So again, we could only highlight a few points in the caption, but that was something that we kind of to draw attention to, that story of emigration, but also the story of the effect on the area that was left, as well as the effect on the push-pull factors, I guess, as we're always talking about. So yeah, we just, I think it might even be one of the first images in that section, John. So it's a fairly striking one.
It is, yeah. It's again, I suppose, just chronologically being an early one, and the great grandfather was born in Ballina, and I thought it was just an interesting story, like you said there, Sarah, and that he brought his parents back because obviously he'd gone before the famine, and then he was obviously familiar what was happening, during the famine, and then to kind of obviously come over and bring them back again. It was obviously very very deliberate, and. There's still, in fact, I know some of the Blewitts from Mayo who will be distant relatives of Joe Biden, and then his other family, if I recall, coming from Louth on the east side of the country as well. So, yeah, a nice. It's nice to again just find these pictures of ancestors and of connections to the present as well, and to find out more about the story as well. And I think just definitely makes it a bit more real because you kind of hear about the ancestors traveling over and back and so on, but when you actually see them, I think it makes a bit more more resonance. So this is another nice picture from it's actually from our introductory section of the book, but it's an example of where these pictures come from. This one came from the London School of Economics, and we don't have a name for this young girl, but it's again quite a striking picture of the Irish women demanding a vote. And I suppose just in terms of timing, Sarah Ann, for this, because we were saying
so it's around 1907 to 1914, and obviously suffrage was granted in 1918 to women over 30. The colours, obviously, we can the suffrage colours, the green and the purple, and I suppose it's obviously this has been taken in a photographic studio. It's we can see it's been taken for the purpose of highlighting the issue. It's a propaganda photograph, but she is, I think, an excellent example as to why suffrage was needed. We were giving a talk in this recently, and it was the first time I really thought about the fact that she probably still couldn't vote for a number of years. I think it just highlights, for me anyway, and me and Jan have talked about this, I suppose. The campaign for suffrage was from the late 19th century. So we have another image in the book. I don't know if we're going to get to it, of the first female municipal judge in the USA. But again, a lot of the women that we've highlighted, or the activists, like suffrage was central to a lot of their campaigns and their beliefs. So that's one of the prelims in the book, and I love it. John found this. I love it. I think it's great.
It's quite a modern marketing idea, isn't it, Sarah? And to use it, because you're implying the legacy of these future girls who can't vote. It's very striking, that they chose to use a child, in one way.
Yes. And I actually think the colorized version is just beautiful. I think it's stunning.
Well, I'm going to make sure we can try and get on to that picture you mentioned.
Yes, I was thinking that too. And it's we're going slower than usual, John.
I'm going to make sure we strategically get on to the pictures within the American Connection as well.
It's fabulous, though, John. We're loving it.
This is another. Well, I think it's a favorite of both of ours, Sarah Ann. But I love it because I got there in the end, because there's so much detail in it, and it's just. Well, for me, I suppose it's kind of an eye-opener in terms of how the range of products. This is from 1916, so it's 105 years ago. The range of products that were actually available to buy. It's from Waterford, and it's, as it says there, at Mortimer's shop. But when I was colorizing it, and there's things like you would expect, names you would probably know, like Cadbury's and Fry's and so on. There's OXO, little blocks of OXO. There's Peak Free biscuits. So I went looking for all of the different packaging and boxes to try and make sure I could get as many of the right colors for these as possible. It wasn't always possible, but tried to find, for each of these items, if there was a picture of the antique, I suppose now, box that it would have come in. The interesting one I thought was, and this is an American Connection, and I'm going to put this into color just so you can see it. At the very bottom of the picture, you'll see there's a row of tin cans, and those tin cans are actually Alaskan salmon. Oh. And again, I was just kind of amazed that in 1916 there was tins of Alaskan salmon in Waterford. I kind of, if you'd asked me when the tin cans come to Ireland in terms of tinned fish, I would be saying, probably, if I had to guess, maybe the 50s or something, But as it happens in an Alaskan library, digital library online, I found some pictures of the actual wrappers from these cans, and I use those colors to color them in. I think it's canoe salmon it's called.
Wow.
And yeah, just there's a lot there. So those different fries boxes, peak cream biscuits, as I said, behind the wife of Mr. Mortimer, and there's just a lot of detail going on here, from cigarettes to peas to all the fruit. I think Sarah Ann was something that was kind of quite surprising as well.
The fruit, everyone, the fruit. It's like, yeah. And we were just, I was just looking at something for around Christmas, the history of Christmas and that, and a lot of people's recollections that maybe in the 1940s getting like a mandarin or, you know, a piece of fruit in your stocking. But like this is earlier, this is 1916. And things that I suppose this, like John did so much work on this image, but we wanted to highlight some of the family businesses that were operating at the time, and I suppose how everyone in the family had to work in them from children up. But as well, I think even just like if you're an economic historian, like the price of tea, the price of, you know, like that's really interesting too, to just kind of use the images that way as part of those stories. So yeah, this was 2 Bridge Street for people who know Waterford. And sometimes actually when John, with the social media accounts, which I love, people go and take photographs of the places today and they post them, and you know, I know that someone had said to me that, you know, there was some kid in local area who was going to do a little history of this, how it is now and how it was then. So I think there's that then and now piece that's really interesting too. Yeah.
And Sarah, and just on that, like roughly was 2 and 6 okay for tea? Like was that within the range of a normal
it's probably
family?
a tiny bit more like even some of the produce, we've talked about this, it would have been like a certain type of customer maybe was you know,
shopping here.
So I think we could say that
well, especially chocolate would be a luxury, like, you know, so you mightn't be buying your tea in this store if you're a poorer family.
But or maybe that's what you're buying. That's kind of it. But sure, the students always laugh when I give them the articles on women and drinking tea and how much fear there was around it, that it was such a waste, you know, of their time, and they're just sitting around drinking tea, and you know, there was a lot of hysteria around that around this time, actually, 1920s, 30s. So I give them this article on the perils of tea drinking. But I suppose, you know, that's each one of these you could go off and write another undergraduate essay or postgraduate essay on something emanating from it. But in regards to like the history of consumerism and that this photograph, you could go for a while, I think, John.
So you can pick every kind of item you could see in there and do a little story on it, you know. It's definitely
importing and exporting and colonization, everything, you know.
So this actually, next picture is actually from 1916, or actually 2 pictures I should say, from Massachusetts. And you know, I love these pictures when I saw them in the Library of Congress. They're, you know, Irish descendants of people that came over from Ireland. And actually the person on the left hand side, Evelyn Casey, there's a lot of detail about her and her family online. There's a blog post has been written about it, because, you know, it's a very striking picture. There's actually 2 pictures of Evelyn in the same archive, one from the side and one from the front. And there's information about her children, one who died in World War II, and, you know, just kind of putting context, I suppose, about where these people went to. Two pictures of child laborers, and you know, they were taken by Lewis Hine, who, you know, basically shone a light on child labor at the time in various parts of the US. And, you know, I think these people would have been saying they were certain ages when they probably weren't. You know, the guy on the right said he was 17.
17,
no way.
I'm guessing not. You know, if he's 13, he's lucky. But so here's the color version.
Oh wow.
Yeah, so as John said, they're from the National Child Labour Committee. They obviously were trying to look at the topic. These are from 1916, June 1916. And I'd say James Donovan, who, if he's 17, then then I'm 22. But he, you know, I think it's really interesting, as John said, the amount of detail they gave about their working lives, like their working lives, and they're such a young age. And Evelyn talks, like James was an Irish sweeper in Fall River Ironworks. She worked in Borden Mills and talked about that and the conditions, and like there has been a lot more research done on the history of what you could call child labor, or you could call children working. It's there's a discussion about that too. But you know, I think that they're fascinating, the amount of detail their accounts and their testimonies gave. And we really wanted to include these and to include them to show, I suppose, that piece where, you know, people emigrated, but still obviously there's the next generation that are trying to, you know, work and build. And Evelyn said she was 15 in this, which is actually probably very possible, John, I'd say. So born in 1901, her parents, Michael Casey. And yeah, I think we just wanted to really include that side of the migration story.
Yeah, again, it was interesting just for me to kind of do the kind of genealogy thing, and I would have found the records of Joanne Harrington and Michael Casey getting married. I think it was actually their parents might have come over from Ireland originally, but you know, it was a whole, again, a rabbit hole you could kind of go down and find more information about. So this is the one we mentioned earlier on, Sarah.
We got here.
Yeah, we got here. Yeah, from County Carlow to the US and to the present, I suppose, through this picture, Judge Mary Otoole, who was the first municipal judge in the US, and it's a great picture, isn't it? Just at work. Yeah, sorry, Anne.
No, I was just going to say, she seems like a formidable woman, and definitely, you know, I'm going to read the quote she gave, actually, John, you know, where she says, like, you know, why suffrage should be granted for women at least. And she said, you know, why do I favor suffrage for the district, as well as ask me why I want to eat? One seems quite as obvious as the other. So like this taken in the 1920s, very, very progressive woman. But I think, you know, particularly on like workers' rights, suffrage, she was really, really kind of important figure. And John, you found this, and you, like, I loved when you highlighted this. I was like,
yeah, it was actually one of her
woman. We don't know enough about her in Ireland anyway. So yeah,
it was one of her family approached me who had been doing a kind of a project, I suppose, about Mary Otoole. So someone who was in Ireland and related to Mary Otoole, and just, you know, pointing me to her. And then I started looking for pictures, and I found this one. And you know, there are a number of pictures of her in the Library of Congress, but I think this one just kind of jumped out at me in particular. And I suppose that's one of the things I think really enjoyed about the book, Sarah Ann, is bringing these people to prominence, because there are amazing people. And, you know, in the first book we had, you know, for example, there were some of the actresses of the time, like Ada Rehan from Limerick, who, you know, we wouldn't know about today, you know, but at the time she was the biggest actress in the world, you know, and admired by Wilde. And there are people, I think, who we've just really the opportunity to re-highlight them and to show people how important they were, from, you know, obviously from Mary Otoole's perspective in terms of changing the game in terms of women judges, but also others in the first and the second book. It's been a real, I think, opportunity for us to kind of highlight what you know, who's been great, and this is a great picture. I do like it. So I'm going to skip on to another American woman from New York.
Oh, look at that here in the bra.
And it's from the Library of Congress as well. It's from a parade in New York, and there's a number of pictures actually from this parade in the Library of Congress, but I do like this one. It's from 1950. Dorothy on the left and Patricia on the right with their little flags. And, you know, when I was colorizing this one, I'll put it into color so we can see. But, you know, there's obviously
I love it in the color.
Little American flag on one side, and you know, something kind of Irishy on the other side. So it's a fun picture. And you know,
and we just kind of got to we really just focused the caption on the parade and the history of the parade, and but again, this was an image we were like, could this be a cover? Because we were just like this, and it was just that. Funny enough, even like we were like, it seemed. I think it seemed later than 1950 for us, John, in regards to some of their clothing. That was some of the sense that we were. But no, it's 1950, and you know, it's the parade was televised around this time, and you know, there's more prominence to it, more attention. And yeah, it was just their faces, the way they are just. And again, when you're able to name and identify people that, you know, and that's just really great when we can do that through the records as well. Yeah.
You know, we were just talking to Brendan Fay last week or the week before about his own activism. You know, he's from the LGBTQ and the St. Patrick's Day for All. And that girl is wearing the green carnation. And he said that was a symbol, you know, that Oscar Wilde actually originally started, which was so funny because people in New York used to wear the carnation, not realizing that, you know, such an iconic LGBT figure as Oscar Wilde had been the one who had popularized it or asked people to wear it, you know, in memory. So that's so funny to see the middle class
and
kids,
when we were looking at it, you know, the different moments like of the parade, like when it was kind of boycotted during the Irish Civil War by some groups, and obviously the question around LGBTQI plus rights, and it's really like for, you know, you get these many intersections, I guess, when you're looking at the kind of just this one like yearly event. So yeah, we really wanted to include that too, as well as the fact that it's just, I think it's an excellent image.
Beautiful.
We have just two more, I think, folks. So I'm going to skip on to this one, which is again related to our first picture, I guess, in that it's from roughly the same era, and it's from Cork, Sarah Ann, where a place close to your heart.
Yeah, like it's near Buckley, which if people drive, Buckley is fantastic, but also a lot of people who've traveled around Ireland will know it as a bit of a bottleneck. But it's the Cahermy Horse Fair, which was this is 1954 as well, isn't it, John? I think I got it, or it could be 52
maybe 52. Yeah, sorry, I know it's 2 years away from the other one. Yeah, it's actually I don't have that.
But it would have been like over the centuries, and really
54 actually,
54, it would have been had a lot of support from members of the traveling community. They had the parade of caravans, and you can see when John puts this into color, you know, it's so, I suppose, beautifully decorated. Everyone was so well presented. And you know, there was like a trophy and a presentation at the end, and it was just like a real tradition. It was moved closer to the town from 1921, but we really wanted to highlight it. And in the front, the woman is Lizzie Hannafin Fury, who I think it was her niece or her grandniece had highlighted, was it, John?
Yeah, she was the niece of Ted Fury, of the Fury brothers, and her granddaughter was in touch with me, and I sent them a copy of the book. Her mother would be Lizzie Fury's daughter, and there's a great obituary online in the Kerry Men, because she lived in Kerry, about her and her life, and so it's again just fascinating to get the stories of the people and what they went on to do, and hear about their descendants, or to hear from their descendants, and you know, it really has such an impact on them when they can see these pictures. It's just been.
And I suppose I didn't say this at the start, but the you know, at the moment there's luckily a lot more attention on highlighting and ensuring that the history of Irish travellers has more prominence. There's just a job actually in the National Museum being advertised, but this is you know, a number of years before the Commission on Itinerancy in 1963, when some of the treatment, at least locally, and the engagement between farmers and the community more generally would have been somewhat less hostile. So I think like this photograph and the other are really interesting for me that way, if you look at the context of at least the 20th century and the treatment of Irish travellers. So yeah, it's It's a great image.
And
And National Library of Ireland again.
National Library, thanks again. Yeah,
I think I shared this recently, yeah.
Well, this is Irish America, I guess, at its best. We've Ireland on the left and America on the right. But something about the picture, isn't it? It's almost kind of like there's a kind of a mirror going on in the middle, or they're kind of, they're
yeah.
But it's just got great character in it, and again from the Library of Congress. Yeah, it's again, it's one I would have colorized early on, but would have revisited for our second book, and it's a very fun one, isn't it?
Yeah, obviously Brendan Behan, Jackie Gleason. I think it's actually in Gleason's dressing room after his show Take Me Along in 1960. But that was Behan had kind of famously, when he arrived in America with his bottle of milk, said, he was on the dry, and that wasn't the case the whole way through. But I just think like this is really kind of two big characters. And if you're kind of looking at what happens in Behan's life in the years after this, and it's a moment in time. John, sorry.
No, I was just saying, just thinking there, it's kind of funny, Sarah, because I think there's, it's a bit like people who remember the phones with the dial you kind of spun around. I suppose certain portion of people will remember Jackie Gleason. I remember watching his TV shows on television, but now I'm sure probably if you ask people, a lot of people will be unaware. Probably no more than Brendan Behan. I think again it's part of the thing of the book is that we can again highlight these points in history, and these people who were again at the time were icons, in terms of obviously TV in Jackie Gleason's case, but also literature in terms of Brendan Behan's case. And it's just very cool to see the two of them meeting together as well, to see these worlds colliding.
I know, and as you say, Johnny, for some of our younger readers, our younger readers, even if they know the names, they don't have they don't have the visual there. So
it brings it to them. So
I had shared the black and white version of this along. There was some anniversary of Brendan Behan's recently, as you say, Sarah, and the sadness of the life, and that disastrous kind of American tour in the end, was very sad. So this was amazing. I hope you have time for a couple of questions. I'm not rushing off to class.
I have a few minutes work. Anyway.
Good. Yeah, you've done amazing work, and as you said, John, a number of times, what I love about the two books, to be honest, is the mix of just ordinary people and even kind of marginalized groups like the travelers maybe, but also these infamous people or people who stayed famous. Can you talk a little bit, and you have done, but I think the whole idea of the technology at the time, we talked about how the photographs were posed at the time and how that evolved, but also how did you do it? Are your naked eyes better than mine to see all the details, or is there some kind of technology that you almost had to invent, like an AI type thing, other than just a magnifying glass, to know what the labels say, or that there was a picture of Jesus on the corner,
it's a bit of both. So I do use an artificial intelligence system called the Otoole, which is developed by two Americans, Jason and Dana. They live in San Diego, and I've met with them 2 years ago. So I use that to give me basically the initial colorization, and it does a great job in terms of coming up with the common colors for natural items like trees and the sea and skin tone and so on. Does a very good job in it. But of course, after that, there's a lot of detail, as you've said, whether it's the picture of Jesus in the background or the picture of the salmon from Alaska. So there's, I suppose, the hard part is doing that research in terms of figuring out what else is in the picture, who's there, maybe what color eyes do they have, are there any records, prison records, travel records like from Ellis Island in terms of people going to the US, labels, paintings. There's a picture in the book of it's from the Eucharistic Congress in 1932. Two pictures actually. One is from a family outside a house, and there's paintings in the background, and there's souvenirs and so on. And I was trying to find all of the colors for these different items. And then there's a picture of bishops and cardinals in clerical dress, and again, would have to try and figure out, well, what parts of these are purple, what parts are red, and what parts are black, and trying to learn about the different parts there. I learned more about papal knights and their outfits than I'd ever known. So, you'll find, depending on the picture, there's a picture in the book which you can see kind of a version of it behind me, which is from the second Dáil. And in that picture,
I was looking at that.
Yeah, there are paintings of all of the Lord Mayors. There are coats of arms of different Lord Mayors. I would have had to go through those and try and identify those so that I could use the right colors. So it's a combination of the AI, but also I think a lot of the work is the human research and the time spent on that. And Sarah, I suppose having the context as well in terms of the clothes, in terms of like Sarah has put us in touch with for example historians of uniforms in Ireland and the UK. That's been invaluable in terms of knowing actually what do these people wear and to be able to transfer that back into the picture.
Yeah, like I think.
Go ahead.
Oh yeah, sorry, no, you go.
I was just going to ask you to kind of comment on that part of, I think, what's so fascinating about the photographs, and we talked a little bit about it with the kids on the style. I mean, the poverty really is revealed, but also colorizing it, I think, brings up, maybe a different aspect of poverty, like that it wasn't all drab and gloomy, and like that they did have maybe nice material or these vibrant colors, and so you look at poverty a little bit differently, I think, when it's not assumed like that everything was gray.
Yeah, like I think a few things, like first of all the selection, like for us the selection, thank you for saying it, because we did try to reflect, I suppose, how Irish society was. So it was diverse, and we really tried to highlight differences in social class and and then I suppose when it came to the discussion of colorization and history and that, like, to me, like what I'm fascinated about is that, like, there's been very little attention on just kind of how much audiences take from it, and really, it's really quite an old debate. Like myself and John, not that we were surprised, but it's been, there was debates from the 1980s, and different technology has been used since the 19th century when it comes to photography. And there was a lot of discussions recently on social media about, I suppose, more historicizing colorization as opposed to that it's this new debate, which it really isn't. And I suppose in the second book, one of the things that we were trying to highlight is you have to look at, like, its potential and the potential colorization has, and I suppose how useful it has been. I have not seen the same attention or interest in some of these topics as I have seen in the last year and a half working with John on this. So the potential of the technology to do that, and that's before we talk about the feedback we've had, because see, we get a lot of feedback, John gets a lot of feedback, and the feedback that we get is that it just does help people connect more. It just does. And it helps them, I suppose, look at things more empathetically. And in particular groups, in particular, like John, like we have had people who have had relatives with dementia. We have had, like someone who was born in 1905, the world was in color. That's just the way it was. So like for us, we've just seen how beneficial it is. And I suppose I need to say as well, it's like John is a very, very skillful and diligent colorizer. He is. I've worked with him. I've not seen John may have a future career as a historian. He's got the obsession to go down the rabbit holes. So it's not like, and Marina Amaral has talked a lot about this herself, like she doesn't want to see photographs doctored, or like this is not morally. So anyway, I'm talking a bit too much, but just to say, like, we have considered all of this. We're not oblivious to it.
But I think aside even from the fact that, like, we're living in an Instagram era sort of thing, so you're bringing younger people in maybe, and that they're able to spot things. This is just how they live. They live in a visually coded world, and so when you're able to kind of do this with pictures. But I think the other thing is even things like, look at all the historians you mentioned today, Sarah, and like, and the details, the emblems on the RIC uniforms, like, you know, I wasn't sure was there a little spike on their hat or not, and did I know that, you know? And so it brings out details for us historians too that maybe are lost. And I mean, that picture behind you of the first doll is, when that's in black and white, you were just looking at really a sea of lights. Like, it's very difficult to pick out, you know, the opulence of the mansion house or all of these.
And John lost a few weeks of his life to that now, because every portrait and then every book on every portrait, and
well, and it's obvious that you're not adulterating, you know, or adding to images. Like, you've done the research on the types of dyes, and again, some of that are like techniques that we're losing, that we would lose, you know, if you hadn't gone in and looked in the archives. Oh, they actually have the recipe for how to make the red, you know what I mean? And so,
well, another thing I'd say, and just this relation to the doll picture is, you know, there are a number of paintings of the same picture that were done by people who were born after this scene happened, and they're almost taken as a kind of a de facto of this is what it was. You know, I think the painters did their best guess in terms of, here is the colors that were used for the drapes and the tablecloths and so on. We're doing our best in terms of trying to do the research and to, you know, to make it relevant. It's never going to be 100%, but again, as Sarah mentioned, colorization has been going on since the 1840s. Since first black and white pictures came out, people wanted to see them in color because they wanted to relate to those pictures in color. So it's nothing new. The debate's been going on for a long time, but I think, as Sarah mentioned, just the thought that we've obviously, you know, brought history to the attention of people who may not have been interested in history before, but also those positive impacts on people's lives. You know, this book being used in older adult units in various hospitals for this reminiscence therapy, by helping people to connect to the past, they are better able to connect to the present. There are just unexpected benefits, I suppose, from what we thought was probably going to sell maybe a few hundred or a few thousand copies, but I suppose gone beyond that. So it's just, you know, the stories of how it's impacted on people's lives, what they've learned, you know, what they've gone to afterwards, people taking this and even just making their own creations based on it, whether that's paintings or sketches or, you know, poems. There's been so much that's kind of come out of it, and that's just been very rewarding.
And like the technology of photographs, you even said it with the stereographs and the 3D thing. And look at the mediums, you know, back in the day, who would doctor photographs to show you the ectoplasm, you know, so like, what else did I want to say? Oh yeah, the details about the flowers and the brooches, I thought that was amazing. And then the last thing, you know, I suppose it's one little comment, you know, can you talk about the fact of the photography back in the day? You know, so a lot of people say, oh, they never smiled, and, you know, but is that because you had to stand there for so long while they got the image? Like that, we saw the little girl at the style, like your face is blurry if you move at all, you know.
I think it's a couple of things. I think it's probably unexpected in terms of what was going on, and you know, probably not realizing, like we know now, if you smile for a photograph, it's captured and you can instantly see the response, so you're programmed to smile. I suppose at the time, perhaps that you know, the idea of saying cheese or sausages or whatever it is wasn't obviously as prevalent, but it really is what you mentioned there in terms of the longer exposure times. You had to stay still, and that you know, and you look at many of the old photographs and you see these kind of blurred shapes, especially in kind of town scenes where you know, a horse has moved or some people have moved, and they almost look like ghosts because they haven't stayed still for long enough. One of the earliest pictures in our book is from 1843. It's from Hardwicke Street in Dublin, and you can see the people who've stayed very still, and you can see the people who've moved, and you know, it really has this kind of eerie effect because it does look like kind of a ghost effect. So yeah, you know, it was a bit of both. I think largely because people had to stay still, but also maybe just it was unknown in terms of that
there was a little bit of the deer in the headlights kind of.
And we also, like, and in the first book we addressed this straight up in the introduction, where we said, like, it's not a history of photography. That's not our, like, I'm not a historian of photography, John isn't, and we just like highlighted who are, and you know, where you should go for like a very detailed like, and like you know, if I start naming some of them now, I'll just get in trouble, so I won't.
No, we have the book in the store. You can buy the book.
Yeah, luckily there is it is a buoyant area, which is great. And kind of, I think that those questions around consent and, you know, the technology at the time now, that is really interesting. And like, again, we want people to go down those rabbit holes and, you know, take a look at Erica, Hannah, or whoever, you know, your whatever you're having yourself. Yeah.
Yeah. And Sarah, and just on that, maybe you can speak a little bit. I actually didn't realize that we have photographs, you know, from 1843. I was thinking about the daguerreotype, and when isn't it, or is it a little bit unusual that we really don't have like photographic imagery of the hunger? Like we have James Mahony's sketches.
We have more the kind of the drawings, the pictorial evidence. Yeah. Like I won't answer that conclusively. Okay. So I'll just say, like, we went as early as we could.
Okay, yeah. Well, and I suppose the cameras were probably difficult to traipse around.
No, John, you jump, John. Yeah, we have. What's the earliest in this? It's the
1843, which is just pre-famine, and you know there is a picture in the National Gallery of Daniel O'Connell. It's the only surviving picture. It's a daguerreotype. It's, you know, it's hard, a little bit hard to make out, but it is still amazing that, you know, there is a picture of him, and it's from the 40s as well, 1840s as well.
Yeah.
You know, some of the pictures we have, like of those young boys who saw around from the 50s, there is a kind of a gap there. There are some pictures, kind of, you know, Sean Sexton collection has pictures of people from around famine eras, people who worked during that time. So we definitely have pictures of people who lived through it. But as you say, there aren't nothing that I'm aware of in terms of that kind of 5-year period, and probably I suppose for, you know, maybe from wealthier circles and so on. Like we have a picture in the first book of the Duke of Wellington, and I think it's from around that era, but I suppose for obvious reasons, you know, people probably just weren't taking pictures because of what was going on.
Yeah. Well, that's it. It wasn't like today you would send, you know, a news team to cover the portable
nature of it, or not. You know, the
and plus it probably was difficult traveling with cameras and setting them up, you know, so you're not going to, and then the last thing, what about the likes of these poor men being used for the wine bottles? Have you seen the 19 crimes?
19 crimes. Yeah, I was actually in Belfast, you know, recently enough, and I saw for the first time the bottle up there.
Yeah, it's a good Shiraz.
I've seen it a lot in the local growth, in the local.
The challenge with
some time in the red wine section occasionally.
Yeah, there are actually two. One is one of the Catalpa Six, and one is of John Boyle O'Reilly, as it happens, young John Boyle O'Reilly. That's I suppose it's like a lot of pictures in the public domain that you can do what you want with them. So it's. I think what's kind of funny for me is that, you know, when I started colorizing the Catalpa Six pictures, of course, the first thing that came up was, that's the guy from the bottle of wine, you know? It's sad that the people are known for being on the cover of a bottle of wine as opposed to being known for their story. And I think hopefully through our book and through the first book, and since there were so many copies of it out there, that people will know the true story, because we have that same picture of John Boyle O'Reilly. We have the picture of the guy from the Catalpa Six. Hopefully at least that story, it counterbalances
the wine.
All the bottle of wine in.
But you know, at one point they had an app, and you could like download it on your phone, a QR code, and hear the story. I don't know if they still do that.
That's probably trying to be a bit more.
Yeah. So guys, this was absolutely fascinating. I'm so delighted we had you. We'll definitely have to have you back to talk about some of your other projects. I think, you know, we have, as I say, copies of the book in store, and of course you should support your local shop instead of, you know, these online giants. But you know, I think it does make history come to life. And I loved in the first book, you know, when you found those women, the Kerry girls, and some of them are, you know, here in America. And so, as you say, like, it is just a way of personalizing, you know, and kind of immediatizing, is that a word, history, that I think our members would absolutely love to look. Everyone loves looking old photographs. And, you know, now that you can see so much more, I think your work is amazing. So thank you both for joining us. And
thanks for having us.
And again, thank you with the time difference and everything. But we'll be in touch, and so thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Best of luck with the books. Bye bye.
Slán.
Slán is right.